Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step into the pale grey hush before sunrise, where the air is cool enough to prickle your skin and the ground still holds the night's quiet. You lie there for a moment, wrapped in a thin blanket that smells faintly of dust leather and old smoke, listening to the low shifting sounds of cattle nearby. It is not peaceful in the way a quiet room is peaceful. It is a live. Heavy breathing, the soft clink of a loose chain, a distant hoof scraping the earth. And somewhere in the back of your mind you realise something with a small, almost amused sense of dread. You probably would not survive this for very long. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share your location and the time where you are right now. There is something quietly comforting about knowing where everyone is drifting off to sleep across the world. Now dim the lights. You push yourself upright, feeling the stiffness already settled into your back from yesterday's riding. The ground beneath you is uneven, packed hard in some places and soft in others, as if the land itself cannot quite decide what it wants to be. Around you, shapes begin to take form as the sky lightens. A line of bedrolls, the outline of a wagon, a few men already moving slow and deliberate, as if they have done this so many times that waking early no longer feels like an interruption. The smell reaches you next. Coffee strong and slightly burnt, drifting from the chuck wagon, where the cook has already begun his work. It cuts through the heavier sense of manure and dust, offering something almost comforting, even if it is rough around the edges. You stand stretching carefully, aware that every movement matters now. There is no easy way to recover out here. No soft bed waiting later. What you feel in your body now is what you carry with you for the rest of the day. A commonly accepted historical detail is that cattle drives often began before sunrise, not out of romance, but because the heat later in the day could exhaust both animals and riders. You feel that logic settling into you as the chill lingers in the air. It will not last. By midday, this same place will feel entirely different. You glance toward the herd. At first, it looks like a single mass, dark and shifting. But as your eyes adjust, you begin to see individuals within it. Heads lifting, tails flicking, a restless ripple moving through the group as if they are aware that something is about to happen. Longhorn cattle with their wide horns catching the faintest light stand packed together, more closely than seems comfortable. There is a strange stillness before movement begins. Not silence exactly, but a kind of held breath. You step toward the wagon, joining the others as they gather for breakfast. Tin cups are passed around, filled with coffee that is more necessity than pleasure. It is hot though, and that matters. You take a cautious sip, feeling the bitterness wake you more effectively than any gentle morning ever could. Nearby, the cook moves with quiet authority. There is no wasted motion. A pot lifted, a pan shifted, bread handed out without sudden ceremony. A widely acknowledged truth among those who study trail life is that the cook held a unique position of influence. A bad cook could sour the entire drive. A good one could hold it together in ways that were not always obvious. You take what you are given. Beans thick and slightly overcooked but filling. Bread that is dense enough to require effort. You eat slowly, not because you want to, but because you're learning that meals are not something to rush. They are moments to prepare yourself for what comes next. A man nearby nods toward you, not unfriendly, but not overly welcoming either. There is an unspoken understanding here. You are part of the group, but that does not mean you are known yet. Respect is something earned over time, measured in quiet actions rather than words. There is an interesting lesser-known detail that some accounts mention. Many cowboys were younger than you might expect, often in their late teens or early 20s, drawn by the promise of steady pay and the pull of the open range. As you look around, you can see that youth in some faces. Not naive exactly, but not yet worn down completely either. The sky continues to brighten, shifting from grey to a pale, almost colourless blue. The horizon stretches out in every direction uninterrupted, giving you a sense of scale that is difficult to fully grasp. There are no walls here, no clear boundaries, just distance. A voice cuts through the quiet, calm, steady, not raised, but carrying enough authority that everyone hears it. Instructions, simple and direct. Time to move. You set your cup aside, wiping your hands against your trousers, feeling the grit of dust already there. It never really leaves, it settles into everything. Your clothes, your skin, even your thoughts begin to feel shaped by it. You walk toward your horse, which stands tethered a short distance away. It turns its head slightly as you approach, watching you with a kind of quiet awareness. You run a hand along its neck, feeling the warmth beneath its coat, the steady presence that you will rely on for hours to come. Mounting is not dramatic, it is practiced. One smooth motion, a shift of weight, and you are in the saddle. From this height, the world looks different. Wider somehow, but also more immediate. Every movement of the herd is easier to see, every change in the landscape feels more relevant. Historians still argue whether the romantic image of the cowboy as a lone figure truly reflects the reality of these drives, or if the experience was far more collective and dependent on cooperation than popular stories suggest. As you sit there surrounded by others preparing in the same quiet way, it feels clear that nothing here is done alone. The herd begins to stir more noticeably now. A low murmur builds the sound of hundreds of animals shifting their weight, testing the ground, responding to the subtle cues around them. Riders move into position, not rushing but not lingering either. There is a rhythm to it, one that you are only just beginning to understand. You guide your horse forward, feeling the slight resistance before it settles into motion. The saddle creaks softly beneath you, leather against leather. A sound that will become familiar, almost comforting in its repetition. The first steps of the herd are hesitant. A few animals move, then stop. Others follow, then adjust. It is not a clean start. It is gradual, uneven, but persistent. And then, almost without realizing it, the entire mass begins to shift forward. Dust rises, immediately fine and light, catching the early sunlight in a way that almost makes it look beautiful. Almost. You fall into place alongside the others, your position not entirely fixed yet, but guided by small gestures and quiet signals. A tilt of the head, a slight movement of a hand. Communication here is subtle, efficient. The ground beneath the herd changes as they move. What was once still becomes marked by tracks, churned into a loose shifting surface that feels less stable with each passing moment. You can feel it through your horse, the way it adjusts its footing, responding to the terrain. There is no dramatic moment where the drive officially begins. No signal that marks the exact transition. It simply happens, one step then another, until stopping is no longer the natural state. You glance back briefly at the camp already beginning to fade behind you. The wagon will follow. The fire will be put out. The space you occupied will return to being just another piece of open land. Ahead there is only distance, and as you settle into the steady rhythm of movement, the sound of hooves and the quiet calls of riders blending into something almost hypnotic, you begin to understand that this is not just a journey across land. It is a way of existing within it. The movement settles into something steadier as the light strengthens, and you begin to notice how each rider finds a place without needing it explained out loud. No one announces roles with ceremony. They simply take shape through habit, experience, and a quiet awareness of where they are most useful. You guide your horse a little closer to the others, watching how they space themselves around the herd, forming a loose shape that seems flexible but deliberate. To your left, a rider keeps a measured distance, his eyes scanning the outer edge of the cattle. To your right, another hangs slightly back, letting the slower animals drift into line rather than forcing them forward. Ahead, two men move with more confidence, guiding the general direction without pushing too hard. Behind where the dust begins to thicken, others prepare for the less comfortable work. A well-established fact about cattle drives is that the crew is usually small, often around 10 to 15 men managing thousands of animals. It feels improbable when you think about it. Standing here watching the herd stretch out in front of you, the scale seems too large for such a small group to control, and yet somehow it works. You shift in the saddle, adjusting your posture as your body begins to understand the demands of the ride. It's not just sitting, It is a constant series of small corrections. Your legs press lightly, your hands guide the reins, your balance shifts with every step your horse takes. You cannot fully relax, but you also cannot stay tense for long. There is a middle ground you are learning to find. The man who gave instructions earlier now rides slightly ahead, not drawing attention to himself, but clearly setting the pace. No one questions it. There is a natural order here shaped less by formal rank and more by trust. He has done this before. That is enough. You hear someone call out behind you a short phrase, almost casual, but it carries meaning. Another rider responds, adjusting his position. It is not loud, it does not need to be. The herd reacts more to tone and movement than to words. There is a subtle rhythm in how communication happens. A whistle, a low call, the shift of a horse's direction. Everything is designed to guide without startling. Sudden noise can ripple through the cattle in unpredictable ways, and unpredictability is the one thing no one here can afford. You glance back briefly and the dust catches your attention again. It rises in soft clouds, trailing behind the herd thickest where the cattle bunch together. You can imagine what it must feel like to ride there for hours, breathing it in, letting it settle into your throat and lungs. There is a detail sometimes overlooked in popular stories. Many cowboys rotated positions throughout the day, not as a luxury, but as a necessity. Riding in the dust for too long could exhaust a man, quickly dulling his focus and making mistakes more likely. As you consider that, you feel a quiet sense of relief that you are not there just yet. Your stomach settles now that the first rush of morning activity has passed. The coffee lingers a steady warmth while the food sits heavier, grounding you. There is no room for distraction. Every part of you is engaged, even if the movement seems simple on the surface. You look toward the horizon again. It has shifted slightly, the light now stronger, the colours more defined. What felt distant before now feels closer, though you know that is only an illusion. Distance on the plains plays tricks like that. What seems near can take hours to reach. A rider moves closer to you, not abruptly, but with an easy confidence. He studies you for a moment, not unkindly, then gestures with his chin toward the herd. "Keep an eye on that side," he says, his voice low and even. You nod, understanding that this is less a command and more an invitation to prove yourself. You turn your attention fully to the cattle nearest you, watching for any sign of restlessness. A head lifting too quickly, a shift in direction that does not match the others. Small things that could grow into larger problems if ignored. An unusual bit of historical trivia notes that some cowboys sang to their cattle at night to keep them calm, believing that familiar sounds reduce the risk of sudden panic. As you ride now, you can almost imagine how sound shapes behaviour here. Even the steady rhythm of hooves seems to create a kind of reassurance. The land beneath you begins to change subtly. Patches of grass give way to stretches of dry earth. The colour shifts from muted green to dusty brown, then back again. It is not dramatic, but it is constant. A reminder that nothing here stays exactly the same for long. You feel the sun now faint at first, then more present. It touches the back of your neck, warming the skin, signalling what is coming later. You adjust your hat slightly, letting the brim cast a bit more shade over your face. Time stretches in a way that feels unfamiliar. There are no clear markers, no clock to check. The only measure is movement. The steady forward progress of the herd, the changing light, the slow build of heat. Some researchers still debate whether the strict hierarchies often portrayed in films truly existed in the same rigid form on actual drives, or if relationships were more fluid, shaped by skill and circumstance rather than fixed roles. As you watch the men around you, it feels like something in between. There is order, but it breathes. It adapts. Your horse shifts beneath you, adjusting its pace slightly. You respond without thinking, guiding it back into line. Already, small actions are becoming instinctive. You are not yet comfortable, but you are less uncertain than you were an hour ago. A calf near the edge of the herd wanders slightly off course, distracted by something you cannot see. You notice it quickly, guiding your horse in a gentle arc to bring it back. No rush, no sharp movement, just a steady presence that encourages it to return. It works. The calf hesitates, then moves back toward the group, its small frame disappearing again into the larger mass. You feel a quiet satisfaction, not dramatic but real, small success that matters more than it might seem. The sound of the herd continues a constant backdrop, hooves pressing into the ground, low calls from one of the cattle, the occasional creak of leather. It blends together into something almost rhythmic, almost soothing if you let yourself settle into it. You realize then that this is how the day will unfold, not in bursts of excitement, but in long stretches of steady attention. The work is not about dramatic moments, it is about preventing those moments from happening at all. And as you ride on the early morning, fading into something brighter and more demanding, you begin to understand that survival here is not about strength alone, it is about patience. The herd settles into a more confident rhythm now, and you begin to feel how movement itself becomes the center of everything. Not fast, not slow, but steady, in a way that seems to stretch time into something softer and less defined. You ride alongside the cattle, your body adjusting to the repeated sway of your horse, the motion gradually smoothing into something your muscles begin to accept. At first, it felt like effort just to stay balanced. Now it feels more like a quiet negotiation between you and the animal beneath you. You shift your weight without thinking too much about it. Your hands hold the reins with a lighter touch, even your breathing begins to match the pace around you. The herd moves as one, but not perfectly. There are always small variations. A few cattle drift slightly ahead, curious or restless. Others lag behind, slower or less certain. Your role, along with the others, is not to force them into strict order, but to gently guide them back into a loose cohesion. A well-documented fact about cattle drives is that pushing the herd too hard could lead to exhaustion, weight loss, and higher risk of injury. You can feel the truth of that in the way the riders handle the animals. There is no shouting, no aggressive driving forward. Instead, there is a careful balance between encouragement and restraint. You notice how the lead riders choose the path not always in a straight line, but in a way that seems to follow the land's natural shape. Slight rises are approached at an angle. Dips are crossed where the ground looks firmer. It is not obvious at first, but the more you watch, the more you understand that every decision is meant to make the journey easier for the herd. The sun climbs higher, and with it the temperature begins to shift. The cool edge of morning fades, replaced by a warmth that settles across your shoulders and down your back. It is not yet uncomfortable, but it carries a quiet promise of what the afternoon will bring. Your eyes move constantly now, scanning the herd, the ground, the horizon. It becomes a kind of meditation, though not the peaceful kind. You are alert but not tense, focused but not strained. A rider ahead raises a hand slightly, signaling a subtle change in direction. You follow the movement, guiding your horse to adjust with the others. The herd responds gradually, the front shifting first, then the middle, then the back, like a slow wave passing through. It is almost graceful. There is a curious detail sometimes mentioned in first-hand accounts. Cattle could travel around 10 to 15 miles a day on a drive like this depending on conditions. That number feels abstract until you are part of it. Now each step seems to carry more weight. You begin to understand how distance is built not in leaps but in countless small consistent movements. A breeze moves across the plains light but noticeable. It carries with it the scent of dry grass and something faintly earthy. You turn your face slightly into it, letting it cool your skin for a moment before it passes. You glance toward the riders around you. No one speaks much. Conversation, when it happens, is brief and practical. There is no need for constant talk. The work fills the space, and yet there is a quiet sense of connection. You feel it in the way riders adjust to one another, maintaining distance without crowding, in the way a glance or a small gesture is enough to communicate what is needed. Historians still debate whether the idea of the cowboy as fiercely independent was shaped more by later storytelling than by reality, or if that independence was always balanced by a deep reliance on the group. As you ride here, surrounded by others doing the same careful work, it becomes clear that no one could manage this alone. Your horse flicks its ears back briefly, then forward again, responding to a sound you barely notice. You trust that awareness, letting it guide you as much as your own senses do. The partnership between rider and horse is not dramatic, but it is essential. A steer near the front edges, slightly away from the group, drawn by a patch of greener grass. One of the lead riders moves smoothly to intercept, guiding it back with a calm practice motion. No force, just presence and direction. You begin to see how much of this work depends on anticipation, not reacting after something happens, but noticing the small signs before it becomes a problem. A shift in posture, a change in pace, a ripple of movement that does not match the rest. There is a lesser-known piece of lore that some cowboys believe certain cattle could sense distant storms before humans could becoming restless, long before any visible sign appeared. Whether true or not, the idea lingers as you watch the herd, wondering what they might be aware of that you are not. The ground beneath you grows slightly firmer as the herd moves onto a stretch of packed earth. Your horse's steps become more even, the rhythm smoother. 'Tis a small relief, though you know it will not last. The land will change again as it always does. You shift in the saddle, adjusting your position to ease the pressure on your legs. Already there is a dull ache beginning to form, a reminder that this is only the start of the day. The sun now sits higher, its light stronger, casting shorter shadows. The early softness has given way to something clearer, more defined. Colours sharpen, edges become more distinct. You take a slow breath, letting it out carefully, feeling the steady rise and fall of your chest. There is no rush, no finish line in sight, only the continuation of movement. A call echoes from behind, brief but firm. You glance back, seeing a slight bunching of cattle where the terrain narrows. Riders move to adjust, spreading out, easing the pressure before it builds into something more difficult. It is handled quickly, almost quietly. You return your attention forward, feeling the flow of the herd settle again. There is a kind of satisfaction in that, even if it is subtle. The absence of trouble becomes its own success. As the morning stretches on, you begin to lose track of how long you have been riding. Time blends into motion, into sound, into the steady presence of the herd around you. And somewhere within that rhythm you start to understand that this is not about reaching a destination as quickly as possible. It is about keeping everything together long enough to get there at all. By the time the sun lifts higher and the light begins to press more firmly against your shoulders, you're guided farther back along the length of the herd. It is not announced as a promotion or a punishment. It simply happens. A rider ahead drifts forward, another eases inward, and before you quite register the shift, you find yourself settling into a position where the air feels thicker, heavier. This is where the dust lives. At first, it is only a faint haze, a soft veil rising from the constant movement of hooves. But as you move deeper into it, the haze becomes something more substantial. It lingers, it clings. Each breath carries a dry weight that settles into your throat, your nose, the corners of your eyes. You pull a bandana up over your mouth, tying it loosely at the back of your neck. It helps, but only slightly. The dust finds its way in regardless, slipping through the smallest gaps, coating everything with a fine layer that you can feel but never fully escape. Accounts from the period often note that riding drag was considered one of the least desirable positions on a cattle drive, precisely because of this constant exposure to dust and debris. You understand why almost immediately. The air here feels used already, breathed already, worn down by everything moving through it. The cattle ahead of you are less distinct now, there are shapes softened by the haze. You rely more on movement than on clear sight. A shift in tone, a darker outline where the herd thickens, the occasional flick of a tail catching the light. Your horse lowers its head slightly as it moves, adjusting to the conditions in a way that feels instinctive. You follow its lead, leaning forward just enough to stay aligned with its motion. There is a quiet cooperation here, an understanding that neither of you can afford to resist the environment too much. The rhythm continues, though it feels different now, more enclosed, more internal. The sounds of the herd are muffled, absorbed by the dust. Hooves still strike the ground, but the sharpness is dulled. Voices carry less clearly. Even your own breathing feels closer, more immediate. You become aware of how your body reacts to this space. Your eyes narrow slightly, trying to filter out the particles. Your throat tightens with each inhale, then relaxes again as you adjust. It is not comfortable, but it becomes manageable. There is a lesser-known observation recorded in some trail diaries. Riders assigned to the back often developed a kind of endurance that was less visible than the skills of those guiding the front, but no less important. It was a quiet resilience, built not from moments of action, but from long stretches of persistence. You feel that beginning now, not fully formed, but present. A steer near the rear hesitates, slowing more than the others, its head dipping as if considering stopping altogether. You guide your horse closer, not rushing just enough to apply a gentle pressure. Your presence alone is often enough. The steer lifts its head, takes a few uncertain steps, then resumes its place in the flow. Small corrections, constant, steady, almost invisible. The sun continues to rise, and with it the dust takes on a different quality. It glows slightly, catching the light in a way that might almost be beautiful if it were not settling into every part of you. Your skin feels drier. Your lips begin to crack at the edges. You lick them absent-mindedly, tasting the faint grit left behind. A rider passes you slowly, moving forward to switch positions with someone ahead. As he goes by, he gives a brief naive nod, his face partially hidden by his own bandana eyes narrowed against the haze. There is no need for words. The gesture is enough. Position shifts like this happen throughout the day, though not always evenly. Some stretches feel longer than others. Some moments pass quickly. Here time seems to stretch more each minute, carrying a little more weight. You focus on the space directly around you, the ground beneath your horse, the nearest edges of the herd, the feel of the reins in your hands. It becomes a narrowing of attention not out of choice but out of necessity. A practical detail often mentioned by historians is that cattle drives required a careful balance between pushing the herd forward and allowing it to graze enough to maintain strength. You notice that even here at the back, the cattle occasionally lower their heads briefly, snatching at bits of grass as they move. It is not a full stop, just a momentary adjustment. The land itself offers little comfort. The grass is patchy, the soil dry and loose in places. Each step stirs more dust, feeding the cycle that surrounds you. Your horse shifts again, stepping carefully through a slightly uneven patch of ground. You respond without thinking, adjusting your balance, guiding it with small movements of your legs. These adjustments are becoming more natural, less deliberate. There is a quiet satisfaction in that. Not pride exactly, but a sense that you're beginning to belong within the rhythm of the work. Some scholars continue to question how much of the hardship described in later stories was emphasized for dramatic effect and how much reflects the everyday reality of the trail. Sitting here breathing in the dust, feeling it settle into your clothes and your skin, it is difficult to imagine this being exaggerated. If anything, it feels understated. A brief gust of wind moves across the plains, stronger than before, and for a moment the dust shifts, thinning slightly. You take a deeper breath, grateful for the change, even though you know it will not last. Within minutes, the haze begins to gather again, drawn back into place by the steady movement of the herd. You adjust your bandana, pulling it tighter this time, trying to create a better barrier. It helps a little more, though, not enough to fully clear the air. The monotony begins to settle in now. Not dull exactly, but repetitive. The same motions, the same sounds, the same careful attention repeated over and over. It is easy to see how someone might lose focus here, how fatigue could creep in unnoticed. But that is the danger. You keep your eyes moving, your awareness active, even as the rhythm tries to pull you into something more passive. A flick of movement at the edge of the herd catches your attention. A steer shifting too quickly. You respond immediately, guiding it back with a steady presence before it has a chance to break away. Again, a small correction. Again, it matters. The sun climbs higher still and the heat begins to settle more firmly across the land. The dust grows warmer, the air thicker. Your shirt clings slightly to your back, damp with sweat that does little to cool you. And yet the herd continues. You continue. There is no clear marker for progress here. No sign that tells you how far you have come or how far remains. Only the steady forward motion, the unbroken line of movement stretching ahead and behind. And as you ride there, surrounded by dust guided by small constant decisions, you begin to understand that this part of the work is not about visibility or recognition. It is about endurance. The dust begins to thin as the herd slows, not stopping all at once, but easing into a quieter pace that signals something you feel more than hear. The riders around you shift positions again, some moving forward, others drifting outward, creating space as the cattle begin to settle. It's not a full halt yet, but it carries the promise of one. You lower your bandana, drawing in a deeper breath, though the air still carries a faint dryness that lingers in your throat. Your lips feel rough, your skin warm, but there is a subtle relief in no longer riding at the back. Ahead, the chuck wagon has already begun to angle into position, moving with a confidence that suggests this routine has been repeated countless times. It does not wait for the herd to fully stop, it anticipates. The cook who left before the riders earlier in the day is already preparing for what comes next. A broadly recognized detail about cattle drives is that the chuck wagon served as the center of camp life, carrying food, tools, and supplies essential for survival on the trail. As you watch it now rolling steadily into place, it feels less like a vehicle and more like an anchor. The herd begins to bunch slightly, their movement slowing further as the riders guide them into a loose formation. Not tightly packed, but close enough to keep them manageable. A few cattle lower their heads, testing the ground, pulling at sparse grass. Others stand breathing heavily, their sides rising and falling in a steady rhythm. You guide your horse to a stop, feeling the shift from motion to stillness ripple through your body. It is almost disorienting at first. The constant sway that has carried you for hours fades, leaving behind a sense of weight in your muscles. You swing down from the saddle, your legs absorbing the ground with a stiffness that makes you pause for a moment. The earth feels solid in a way that is both comforting and unfamiliar after so long above it. Nearby other riders dismount as well, some stretching, others moving directly toward the wagon. There is no rush, but there is purpose. Everyone knows what to do without needing instruction. The smell of food reaches you again stronger now. Beans simmering slowly, meat salted and cooked in a way that favours durability over tenderness. Coffee always present, always slightly burnt, yet somehow welcome. There is a small detail mentioned in some personal accounts that might surprise you. Despite the rough conditions, meals on the trail were often anticipated with a kind of quiet enthusiasm. Not because they were elaborate, but because they marked a pause, a moment where the body could rest and recover, even if only briefly. You take your place near the wagon, accepting a tin plate as it's handed to you. The cook does not speak much. He does not need to. His role is clear, his authority understood. There is a subtle hierarchy here, one that places him just outside the usual chain of command. He does not ride the herd, but without him none of this would function. You sit on the ground, your back against a rolled blanket, the plate warm in your hands. The first bite is simple. Beans thick and filling, bread dense enough to hold together through long days. It is not refined, but it is enough. You eat slowly, not out of caution, but because your body seems to demand it. Each bite feels like a small restoration, a return of energy that you had not fully realized you were losing. Around you, the others eat in a similar silence, broken only by occasional remarks, a short comment about the trail ahead, a quiet joke that earns a brief laugh. Nothing prolonged, the work has not ended, it has only paused. You glance toward the herd still within sight, their forms scattered across the landscape. A few riders remain mounted, circling slowly, ensuring that the cattle do not drift too far. Even at rest, the responsibility continues. A curious note appears in some lesser-known writings from the time. The chuck wagon often carried more than just food. It held tools, medical supplies, and sometimes personal items that riders could not carry themselves. In a way, it was both kitchen and lifeline, a moving point of stability in an otherwise shifting environment. You finish your meal, wiping your hands against your trousers again, the dust returning immediately, as if it had been waiting. The brief comfort fades quickly, replaced by the familiar dryness of the air. The sun now stands higher, its warmth no longer gentle. It presses down steadily, turning the ground beneath you into something that radiates heat back upward. You adjust your hat, again pulling it lower, seeking whatever shade it can offer. There is a moment, brief but noticeable, where everything feels still. The herd is quiet. The riders are seated or standing, conserving energy. Even the wind seems to pause. It does not last. A voice calls out, not loud, but clear enough to carry time to move again. You push yourself back to your feet, feeling the stiffness return immediately, sharper now after the short rest. Your legs protest slightly. Your back tightens, but there is no hesitation. You have already begun to understand that discomfort is not something you wait to disappear. It is something you move with. You walk back to your horse, which stands where you left it, head lowered, resting in its own quiet way. You run your hand along its neck again, feeling the warmth, the steady presence that remains unchanged despite everything. Mounting feels a little harder this time. Your muscles resist, then yield as you swing into the saddle. You settle in, adjusting your position, finding that familiar balance once more. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how much rest cattle actually received during these midday pauses, and whether the balance between movement and grazing was always as carefully managed as idealized accounts suggest. As you look at the herd now, some grazing, others simply standing, it feels like a compromise, shaped by necessity rather than perfection. The riders begin to take their positions again, the loose formation reforming with practiced ease. No commands are shouted, no signals exaggerated. It happens quietly, almost seamlessly. You guide your horse forward, feeling the shift from stillness back into motion. The first steps are slow, measured, as the herd begins to move once more. Dust rises again, though lighter at first, as if it too is easing back into its role. The rhythm returns. You fall into place, your awareness sharpening again, your body adjusting to the demands of the ride. The brief rest already feels distant, replaced by the steady continuation of the drive. And as the herd stretches forward, the land unfolding once more ahead of you, you begin to understand that these pauses are not breaks in the journey. They are simply part of it. The afternoon gathers slowly, almost without announcement, and you begin to notice how the light changes first. It grows harder, less forgiving, pressing down across the plains in a way that flattens shadows and sharpens every edge. The horizon still stretches endlessly, but now it feels more exposed, as if there is nowhere to hide from the weight of the day. The herd moves with a quieter energy, not slower exactly, but more measured. The early rest has taken the edge off their restlessness, and now they fall into a steady pattern. Heads bobbing gently, hooves lifting and settling in a rhythm that feels almost mechanical. You ride alongside them, your body settling once again into the motion, though the earlier stiffness never fully disappears. It lingers in your shoulders, your lower back, a dull reminder that this work accumulates rather than fades. A rider near you tilts his head slightly, eyes narrowing toward the distance. You follow his gaze, scanning the open land ahead. At first you see nothing unusual, just grass dry and sparse in places, shifting slightly in the heat. Then you notice it, a faint line on the horizon, darker than the sky above it, stretching unevenly across the distance. It is subtle, easy to miss if you are not already looking for something. Storm signs. A frequently noted aspect of life on the trail is that weather was one of the most unpredictable and influential forces cowboys had to contend with. There were no reliable forecasts, no early warnings beyond what the land and sky could offer. What you see now is one of those quiet signals. You feel the air shift, though it is slight at first. A change in temperature, a hint of something cooler moving beneath the warmth. Your horse reacts before you fully register it, its ears turning toward the horizon, its body holding a little more tension. The herd responds as well, though less obviously. A few heads lift higher than before, movement becomes less uniform, small ripples passing through the group without a clear source. You adjust your position slightly, staying closer to the edge of the herd, watching for any sign that the animals might become unsettled. This is where anticipation matters most. You cannot stop a storm, but you can prepare for how the herd will react to it. There is a lesser-known observation found in some trail journals. Cattle often grew uneasy before a storm fully arrived, responding to shifts in pressure or distant sounds that humans could not easily detect. Whether that sensitivity was consistent or not, the idea lingers as you watch them now. The sky ahead darkens incrementally, the line on the horizon gaining definition. It is not dramatic yet. No thunder, no lightning, just a slow gathering of something larger than anything you can influence. The riders around you seem to notice it at the same time, though no one announces it. There is a subtle tightening in their movements, a sharpening of attention. Conversations, brief as they were, fade entirely. The man leading the drive shifts direction, slightly angling the herd toward a stretch of land that appears more open, less broken. You follow the change without question, guiding your horse to maintain your position as the formation adjusts. It becomes clear that the goal is not to outrun the storm. That would be impossible. Instead, the aim is to meet it in the best possible conditions. You feel the wind pick up next, stronger now, brushing across your face with a cooler edge. It carries the scent of distant rain, faint but unmistakable. The dust has followed you all day, lifts more easily, swirling in loose patterns before settling again. Your hat shifts slightly with the gust and you reach up to steady it, pulling it down more firmly. The brim casts a deeper shadow over your eyes, though it does little to block the growing intensity of the light. The herd begins to bunch, more tightly drawn together by an instinct you can sense but not fully explain. This is where things can become difficult. Too much pressure, too close together, and the risk of sudden panic increases. You guide your horse outward slightly, helping to ease that pressure, encouraging the cattle to spread just enough to keep them manageable. It is a delicate balance. Too much space and control is lost, too little and tension builds. An often cited detail in studies of cattle drives is that experienced cowboys could read subtle changes in the herd's behavior and adjust their positioning accordingly, preventing problems before they escalated. You're beginning to see how that skill develops, not through instruction, but through constant observation. The sky darkens further, the line of clouds now clearly visible, rolling slowly toward you. There is a heaviness in the air, a sense of anticipation that feels almost physical. A distant rumble reaches you low and stretched out, as if the land itself is shifting. It is not loud, but it is enough to confirm what you already know. The storm is coming. Your horse shifts beneath you, its muscles tightening slightly, responding to the sound. You run a hand along its neck briefly, a small gesture meant as much for yourself as for the animal. The riders hold their positions more firmly now, their focus sharpened, movements more deliberate. There is no panic, but there is readiness. Some historians continue to question how often storms led to serious incidents on the trail, or if later accounts emphasize their danger for dramatic effect. Sitting here now, watching the sky close in, feeling the subtle unease ripple through the herd, it feels less like exaggeration and more like a quiet warning. The wind grows stronger, pushing against you now, carrying with it the first hints of moisture. The dust that once dominated the air begins to settle, replaced by a different texture, heavier, cooler. A drop of rain lands on your arm, barely noticeable but distinct enough to mark the beginning. Then another. The herd shifts again, a more pronounced movement this time, as if responding to something deeper than the surface change. You tighten your grip slightly on the reins, guiding your horse with more intention, ready for whatever comes next. The sky darkens further, the light flattening into something grey and uncertain. Shadows disappear entirely, replaced by a uniform dimness that makes distance harder to judge. And as you ride there between the restless herd and the approaching storm, you begin to understand that this part of the trail is not just about endurance. It is about staying steady when everything else begins to change. The rain does not arrive all at once. It begins as a scattered tapping light, and uncertain each drop, striking the ground with a softness that almost feels gentle after the long hours of dust. You notice how quickly the scent changes. The dry, powdery smell of the trail gives way to something deeper, richer, as the first moisture reaches the earth. The herd reacts before the storm fully settles in. Not a sudden panic, not yet, but a shift in mood. Heads lift, movement becomes uneven. A ripple passes through the cattle that you can feel as much as see. You tighten your focus, guiding your horse with small, deliberate movements, staying aligned with the others. The riders spread slightly, not in a dramatic change, but enough to give the herd space to move without pressing too tightly together. A well-established observation in accounts of trail life is that night and poor weather often brought the greatest challenges especially when visibility dropped and cattle grew unsettled. As the light fades under the thickening cloud trees, you begin to understand how quickly conditions can change. The rain strengthens each drop now more dim, striking your hat, your shoulders, and your hands. It soaks into your shirt gradually, the fabric clinging closer to your skin. At first, it feels like relief from the heat. Then, as the wind picks up, it becomes something else entirely. Colder, your horse shifts beneath you. Its movements less relaxed now, responding to the changes in the air. You keep your posture steady, your hands calm on the reins, offering a kind of quiet reassurance. The sky darkens further, turning from grey to something heavier, more complete. The horizon disappears behind the curtain of rain, leaving you with only the immediate world around you. The herd, the riders, the ground beneath your horse. A low sound begins to build in the distance, not quite thunder yet, but close enough to make the air feel tighter. The cattle respond again, more noticeably this time. A few begin to move faster, pressing into the others, creating small pockets of tension. You guide your horse outward, easing that pressure, helping to spread the movement rather than letting it concentrate. It is a constant adjustment now. Every small shift matters. There is an unusual piece of lore mentioned in some recollections from the trail. Cowboys often rode night guard in storms while softly singing or speaking to the cattle, believing that a steady human presence could keep the herd calmer. Whether the cattle understood the words or simply the tone, the practice persisted. The rain intensifies, falling more steadily now, turning the ground beneath you slick in places. Your horse steps more carefully, adjusting its footing with each movement. You feel that caution through your body, responding instinctively. The first clear crack of thunder rolls across the plains louder than before, stretching through the air with a depth that feels almost physical. The herd reacts immediately, heads jerk up, movement becomes sharper, less predictable. You feel it building, the riders around you respond in kind, tightening their positions, watching, closely ready to act if the herd begins to break. There is no shouting, no frantic motion, just a heightened awareness, every sense tuned to the same possibility. Some historians suggest that the danger of stampedes during storms may have been heightened in storytelling, while others argue that the risk was very real, shaped by sudden noise and shifting conditions. Sitting here now with the thunder echoing and the cattle growing restless, it feels less like a question and more like a presence waiting just beneath the surface. The rain continues steady and unrelenting, drumming against your hat, running down your face in thin streams. Your hands grow colder on the reins, your fingers tightening slightly as you maintain control. A steer near you bolts forward, suddenly startled by the sound, its movement quick and sharp. You react without hesitation, guiding your horse alongside it, easing it back toward the group with steady pressure rather than force. It resists for a moment, then yields its pace, slowing as it merges back into the herd. The tension does not disappear, but it shifts, settling into something contained rather than explosive. You exhale slowly, not realizing you had been holding your breath. The storm continues to roll overhead, the thunder coming at irregular intervals, sometimes distant, sometimes close enough to make your chest tighten. The lightning, when it comes, is brief and blinding, turning the world white for an instant before returning it to grey. Your awareness narrows, further focused entirely on the herd and the immediate space around you. There is no room for distraction, no space for wandering thoughts. A detail noted in several first-hand accounts is that cowboys often worked in near silence during moments like this, relying on instinct and experience rather than spoken instruction. As you ride now surrounded by others doing the same careful work, you feel that silence is something shared. The ground grows softer. With each passing minute, the hooves of the cattle pressing into it, leaving deeper impressions. Your horse adjusts again, stepping with more caution, its muscles working harder beneath you. You shift your weight slightly, easing the strain where you can, though there is little relief to be found. The storm begins to move, not ending, but shifting its center away from you. The rain softens slightly, the thunder becoming more distant. The light remains dim, but it begins to change, lifting just enough to reveal the horizon again. The herd responds to this change as well, their movement gradually smoothing out the earlier tension, easing into a more regular pattern. You feel it in your own body too. The tightness in your shoulders loosens slightly, Your grip on the rein softens. There is no clear moment when the danger passes. It simply fades, replaced by a quieter, steadier presence. A lesser discussed aspect of these drives is how often moments of intensity give way to long stretches of calm, the contrast between them shaping the overall experience. You feel that contrast now, the shift from alert tension back into a more sustainable rhythm. The rain continues lightly, more of a steady fall than a driving force. Your clothes remain damp, your skin cool beneath them, but the worst of it seems to have passed. The riders begin to adjust their positions again. Not dramatically, but enough to reflect the changing conditions. The formation loosens slightly, the pressure easing. You take a slow breath, letting it out carefully, feeling the air move more freely again. And as the storm drifts away across the plains, leaving behind a quieter, softer landscape, you begin to understand that nights like this are not defined by the storm itself, but by how you move through it. The ground still holds the storm in it, soft in places darker, where the rain settled most deeply. Your horse steps with care, testing each patch before committing its weight, and you feel that caution pass up through your legs into your hips, guiding how you sit and move. The air is cooler now, carrying the clean scent that follows rain, though it does not fully erase what came before. Dust lingers, dampened but not gone. For a while the herd seems calmer. The earlier tension fades into a slower, more even motion. Heads lower again. Hooves find a steady rhythm. It almost feels like a reward after the storm and a quiet easing of everything that had tightened. You allow yourself to settle slightly, not fully relaxed but less rigid than before. Your shoulders drop a fraction. Your breathing deepens, the world narrows back to manageable pieces. Then something shifts. It is not obvious at first. A slight quickening at the edge of the herd, a steer lifting its head a little higher than the others, another following. Movement that does not quite match the rest. You notice it because you have learned to notice. Your attention sharpens immediately, your body responding before your thoughts fully form. You guide your horse a step closer, watching carefully, feeling for the change rather than trying to see it all at once. A sound carries across the herd. Not loud, not yet, but different. A low, uneasy tone that spreads from one animal to another. A commonly recorded pattern in cattle behavior is that once a few animals begin to move in alarm, others can follow, rapidly creating a chain reaction that is difficult to stop. You feel that pattern beginning now, like a current building beneath the surface. The first break happens suddenly. One steer lunges forward, then another. Their movement is sharper, faster, cutting against the steady flow that had held the herd together. The ripple spreads small at first, then growing. You lean forward instinctively, tightening your grip on the reins, guiding your horse into motion. Around you, the other riders respond at the same moment, as if connected by something unseen. The sound changes completely. Hooves strike the ground harder now, faster, the rhythm breaking into something unveiled and urgent. The low murmur of the herd rises into a louder, more chaotic noise, a mix of movement and breath that fills the air. You feel it in your chest. Your horse surges beneath you, responding to your cue, moving alongside the edge of the break. The goal is not to stop it head on. That would be impossible. Instead, you angle your movement, trying to turn the leading edge to bend the direction before it gains too much force. There is a striking detail noted in several first-hand accounts. Cowboys often described a stampede as less like a single event and more like a wave, something that builds crests and either breaks apart or carries everything with it. Riding here now, you understand that comparison. The herd surges forward, a mass of movement that seems to blur at the edges. Dust rises again, mixed now with the dampness of the ground, creating a heavier, thicker air that clings to your face. You call out not loudly but firmly, your voice joining the others. It is not about volume. It is about presence, a steady, consistent sound that cuts through the chaos just enough to guide. A curious bit of trail lore suggests that some riders use specific tones or simple songs during the moments like this, believing that familiarity could help settle the herd. Whether it truly worked or not, the idea lingers as voices around you blend into a low, continuous thread. The cattle at the front of the break begin to veer slightly, their direction shifting under the pressure of the riders moving alongside them. You match that movement, guiding your horse in a wide arc, careful not to push too hard, not to create more panic. It is a delicate balance. Too much force and the herd scatters further. Too little and the brake gains speed. Your horse's muscles tighten beneath you, its breath coming faster, but it stays responsive, following your guidance with a trust that feels essential in this moment. You focus on one animal near the front, a steer moving faster than the rest, its path slightly angled away from the group. You move closer, not directly behind, but alongside, using your presence to influence its direction. It resists for a moment, then shifts its path, bending just enough to bring it back toward the others. That small change matters. Others follow. The leading edge of the brake begins to curve the forward surge, losing some of its straight momentum. The noise remains, the movement still intense, but there is a sense that it can be contained. A line from one rider reaches you through the noise, brief and sharp, a signal rather than a conversation. You adjust accordingly, tightening the arc, helping to guide the herd into a wider circle rather than a straight run. This is how it slows, not by stopping, but by redirecting. There is an ongoing discussion among researchers about how often stampedes were fully controlled versus simply allowed to run their course until they exhausted themselves. Sitting here now, working alongside the others to shape the movement, it feels like a combination of both. Control but not complete. Influence rather than command. The herd continues to move, but the pace begins to ease. The sharp edges soften. The chaotic rhythm settles into something more regular, though still faster than before. Your breathing matches the effort, now deeper, more urgent. Your hands remain steady on the reins, though you can feel the tension in your arms. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the surge fades. The cattle slow their movement, blending back into a more unified flow. The noise diminishes, returning to that lower, steady murmur you had come to recognize earlier in the day. You guide your horse back, slightly easing out of the tighter arc, allowing the space between you and the herd to widen again. Your body feels the aftermath immediately, a heaviness in your limbs, a tightness in your chest that slowly begins to release. Around you, the other riders do the same, their positions adjusting their movements, returning to a more measured pace. No one celebrates. No one speaks more. The work simply continues. A detail often overlooked in popular depictions is that these moments, intense as they are, do not stand apart from the rest of the day. They fold back into it, becoming just another part of the ongoing rhythm. You take a slow breath, letting it out, carefully feeling the steadiness return. The ground, still soft from the rain, bears the marks of what just happened. Deepened tracks, disturbed patches, signs of movement that will fade over time. And as you settle back into position, your awareness sharpened, but your body beginning to calm, you understand that what you just experienced is not rare. It is part of the work. The energy from the run lingers in your body long after the herd settles again. Your hands remain slightly tighter on the reins, your breathing a touch deeper than before, as if your body is not yet convinced that the urgency has passed. Around you, the others ride on in that same quiet way, their movement steady, almost as if nothing unusual has happened at all. But you feel it, a kind of alertness that does not fade quickly. The land ahead begins to change, though at first it is subtle. The ground dips gently, the colour darkening in uneven patches. The grass grows thicker in places, greener, softer. You notice how your horse's steps shift again, the firmness beneath you giving way to something less predictable. Water. You cannot see it fully yet, but you sense it. The air carries a faint dampness that is different from the rain earlier. It is steadier, more grounded, the kind of presence that shapes the land rather than passing through it. The herd notices too. Heads lift again, not in alarm this time, but in awareness. The movement grows slightly uneven as some cattle begin to angle toward the source of the scent. Water means relief, but it also means uncertainty. A well-documented reality of cattle drives is that river crossings were among the most dangerous parts of the journey. Not because they were always dramatic, but because they combined several risks at once. Slippery ground, unpredictable currents and animals that could panic if the footing changed too quickly. As you crest a small rise, the view opens in front of you. The river stretches across your path wider than you might have expected. Not rushing violently, but not still either. The surface moves with a steady, quiet force, reflecting the grey of the sky above in shifting patterns. The banks are uneven. One side slopes gently, the other drops more sharply into the water. Mud gathers near the edge, darker and softer, marked by the impressions of earlier crossings, though it is impossible to know how recent they are. The herd slows naturally as it approaches the forward momentum, easing into hesitation. Cattle press closer together, their earlier rhythm replaced by something more cautious. You guide your horse to the side, giving space, watching closely as the lead riders move into position. This is not a moment for rushing. Everything here depends on how the crossing begins. There is a lesser-known observation recorded in several trail accounts. Cattle were often reluctant to enter water unless led by a few willing animals. Once a small group committed, the rest would follow more easily. That pattern becomes clear as you watch now. A rider ahead nudges a few steers toward the bank, guiding them carefully. They hesitate, hooves testing the mud, pulling back slightly before stepping forward again. The ground gives beneath them, soft and uncertain. You can feel the tension ripple backward through the herd. The first animal steps into the water. It is not graceful. The movement is awkward, cautious. The current presses against its legs, shifting its balance. For a moment it seems uncertain whether to continue. Then it does. Another follows. Then another. The pattern builds slowly, not unlike the beginning of the drive itself. A few steps, then more, until the movement gains its own momentum. You guide your horse closer, ready to assist where needed. The edge of the herd begins to press inward, drawn by the movement ahead, but also constrained by the narrowness of the bank. This is where it can go wrong. Too much pressure and the cattle push into one another, losing footing. Too little and the flow breaks apart, creating confusion. You move carefully, angling your horse to ease the pressure and encouraging a more even approach. It is not about forcing them forward. It is about creating the space for them to choose to move. A curious detail mentioned in some recollections is that inexperienced cattle were more likely to balk at crossings, while those that had been on previous drives adapted more quickly. Watching the herd now, you can almost distinguish between the two. Some step forward with a degree of confidence. Others resist, pulling back, shifting side to side. The water darkens around the animals as they enter the surface, disturbed by their movement. Hooves slip slightly on the submerged stones. Bodies press together, then separate as the current nudges them off balance. You keep your eyes moving, constantly scanning for any sign of panic, a sudden turn and sharp movement, anything that might disrupt the fragile flow. A rider near the center raises his voice slightly, not shouting but firm enough to guide. The tone carries across the water, steady and controlled. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how often river crossings resulted in significant losses and whether the dangers were as frequent as later stories suggest. Standing here watching the uncertainty in every step, it feels clear that even a small mistake could have serious consequences. The middle of the herd enters the water, now the movement becoming more crowded, more complex. The current pushes against the mass of animals, creating subtle shifts that ripple outward. Your horse steps into the edge of the river, the water rising around its legs, cool and immediate. You feel the change through the saddle, the way its movement adjusts to the resistance. You guide it carefully, not too deep, just enough to maintain your position alongside the herd. A steer stumbles slightly ahead, its footing slipping on the uneven bottom. For a moment it struggles, its movement sharp and uncertain. You move closer, steadying your horse, offering a calm presence rather than adding to the pressure. The steer recovers, regaining its balance, continuing forward. Again, a small moment that matters. The crossing continues, slow and uneven but persistent. The far bank comes closer, the slope rising, gradually offering a clearer path out of the water. The first animals begin to climb up, their bodies dripping, their movement shifting from cautious to more certain as they find solid ground again. Relief spreads through the herd in subtle ways. Movement smooths, the tension eases. You follow, guiding your horse up the bank, feeling the ground firm beneath you once more. The water falls away, replaced by the familiar texture of earth and grass. Behind you, the last of the herd enters the river, the pattern repeating, though slightly more confident now that the path has been established. You turn in the saddle, watching until the final animals make their way across, ensuring that none are left struggling behind. And as the herd gathers on the far side, shaking off water, settling back into a loose formation, you begin to understand that crossings like this are not defined by speed or strength. They are defined by patience. The ground feels firmer again once the last of the herd climbs clear of the river, though the moisture lingers in darker patches beneath your horse's hooves. Water drips from the cattle in uneven lines, catching the light before disappearing into the soil. For a short while the air feels cooler, touched by the crossing, but you can already sense that it will not last. The herd gathers itself slowly, shaking off the disruption. What had been a careful, cautious movement through water returns to something more familiar. Heads lower, hooves settle into a steady rhythm again. It is not immediate, but it is reliable. You guide your horse alongside the others, allowing the formation to re-establish itself. There is no announcement, no signal that the crossing is complete. The work simply continues as it always does. Ahead, the land stretches out once more, though now there is something different on the horizon. Not a storm, not a change in terrain, something more structured. Buildings. At first, they appear as faint shapes, low and scattered, barely interrupting the line of the plains. But as you move forward, they gain definition. Wooden structures, a few taller than the rest, a thin line of smoke rising from somewhere near the centre. A town. The herd reacts subtly to the shift, not with fear, but with a slight tightening of the movement. The open rhythm of the plains gives way to something more contained as the riders begin to guide the cattle along a more defined path. A widely accepted point in studies of cattle drives is that towns along the trail served as essential resupply points, but also introduced new risks from crowding to unfamiliar noise. You feel that tension begin to build as the distance closes. The riders adjust their positions more deliberately now, closing gaps, maintaining clearer boundaries around the herd. There is less room for wandering here, more need for control. You notice the sounds before anything else. Faint at first, then clearer. A hammer striking wood. The distant murmur of voices, the creak of wagon wheels not connected to your own. It feels different from the sounds of the trail, more layered, less predictable. Your horse picks up on it too, its ears turning toward the town, its steps becoming slightly more alert. You steady it with a gentle pressure, guiding it forward without allowing that alertness to turn into unease. The herd slows again as the path narrows the open spread of the plains, giving way to a more confined route. Dust rises once more, though now it mixes with other scents. Smoke, cooking food, the faint tang of animals kept in closer quarters. You pass the first outlying structures, simple and weathered, their wood faded by sun and time. A figure stands near one, watching as the herd moves by, not hostile, not welcoming either, just observing. There is an interesting detail noted in various accounts. Cowboys were often viewed with a mixture of respect and suspicion. In towns their work admired, but their presence sometimes associated with disruption. As you ride past, you can feel that balance in the way people look on. A few more figures appear, standing near doorways, pausing in their tasks to watch the movement of cattle and riders. Some nod, others simply stare. The main street opens ahead wider than the approach, but still far more confined than the open land you have grown used to. Buildings line both sides of their fronts, facing inward, creating a corridor of sorts that the herd must pass through. The riders tighten their formation further, guiding the cattle carefully, ensuring that none break away toward the structures. The noise increases, the sounds of hooves on packed ground, echoing differently, here sharper, more contained. A horse tied near one of the buildings shifts nervously as the herd passes, pulling slightly at its reins. A man steps forward to steady it, his movements quick but controlled. You keep your focus forward, resisting the urge to look too long at any one thing. Distraction here could lead to mistakes, and mistakes in a confined space carry more immediate consequences. There is a lesser-known aspect of these moments. Some drives passed through towns, quickly avoiding extended stops, while others paused for supplies or brief rest. The decision often depended on timing, conditions, and the needs of the herd. As you move through it, becomes clear that this is not a long stop. The herd continues forward, guided steadily along the street, the riders maintaining a careful balance between control and flow. You mirror their movements, keeping your position, watching for any sign of disruption. A sudden noise breaks from one of the buildings, a door slamming harder than intended. The sound echoes sharply, bouncing between the structures. Several cattle react instantly, their heads jerking up, movement shifting towards the edge of the group. You respond without hesitation, guiding your horse closer, easing the pressure, preventing the reaction from spreading. Around you, the others do the same, their movements quick but measured. The tension passes as quickly as it arrived. The herd settles again, the flow continuing. There is a line of thought among historians that the challenges of moving cattle through towns were less about the physical space and more about the unpredictability of sound and movement. Standing here now, surrounded by both that idea, feels grounded in reality. You pass the centre of the town where the buildings stand closer together, their signs hanging above doorways, though you do not pause long enough to read them clearly. A glimpse of a saloon door swinging open, the brief sound of laughter spilling out before fading behind you. It feels distant already. The far edge of the town approaches the buildings, thinning, the open land returning gradually. The path widens again, the sense of space expanding with each step forward. The herd responds almost immediately, spreading slightly, the earlier tension easing, as the confines of the town fall away. You follow, guiding your horse back into the more familiar rhythm of the trail, the sounds of the town fading behind you. There is no dramatic transition, no clear line marking where one world ends and the other begins, just a gradual return. And as the open plains stretch out ahead once more, you begin to understand that towns are not destinations on this journey. They are interruptions. The town fades behind you more quickly than you expect, its sounds dissolving into the open air until they feel almost imagined. The herd stretches out again, reclaiming its shape across the land, and the path ahead returns to that familiar expanse of distance without edges. It is quieter now, though not silent. The steady rhythm of hooves returns, grounding everything once more. Your body, however, does not return to anything resembling ease. You shift slightly in the saddle, trying to find a position that does not press against the same sore points that have been building since morning. Your thighs ache with a deep, persistent heaviness. Your lower back carries a dull stiffness that seems to settle more firmly each time you adjust. This is what the work feels like after hours of riding. Not sharp pain, but something more constant. A presence that does not demand attention, but never fully disappears. A widely recognized detail from historical records is that cowboys spent the majority of their working hours on horseback, often riding 10 to 12 hours a day during active drives. Sitting there now, feeling the weight of each movement, that number becomes less abstract. You roll your shoulders, slightly easing the tension where you can, though the relief is brief. Your hands remain steady on the reins, but you notice the subtle fatigue there as well. Fingers tightening more often, grip adjusting more frequently. Your horse continues forward, its movement as consistent as before, though you can feel the effort in it too. The muscles beneath you work steadily, carrying not just its own weight, but yours as well. Hour after hour, you run a hand along its neck for a moment, feeling the warmth, the slight dampness of sweat beneath its coat. There is a quiet understanding there, an unspoken agreement that both of you are enduring the same long stretch of effort. The sun presses down again, stronger now that the storm has passed completely. The brief coolness has given way to a steady heat that settles into your clothes, your skin, the air itself. It is not unbearable, but it is persistent. You adjust your hat once more, angling it to block as much of the light as possible. The shadow it casts is small, but it helps. The herd moves with a steadier confidence again, the earlier disruptions fading into the background. Heads lower, movement smooths. The line of cattle stretches forward in a way that feels almost continuous, like a river of motion across the land. You watch them carefully, your attention shifting between the edges of the herd and the space ahead. The work has not changed, but your awareness of it has deepened. There is a small but interesting observation noted in some first-hand accounts. Many cowboys develop specific ways of sitting in the saddle to reduce strain, shifting their weight, subtly adjusting posture to manage long hours of riding. As you experiment with your own position, you begin to understand why. You lean slightly forward, then back, testing how each adjustment affects the pressure on your legs. Some positions offer brief relief, but none last long. The discomfort moves rather than disappears. Your mind begins to wander in small ways, not fully distracted, but drifting between the immediate work and quieter thoughts. The repetition of movement creates space for that, even as your attention remains anchored to the herd. You think about how the day began, the cool air, the quiet preparation. It feels distant now, replaced by the accumulated weight of hours. A rider passes you, slowly moving towards a different position. As he goes by, he shifts in his saddle, stretching one leg slightly before settling again. The motion is brief, but it carries a kind of familiarity. Everyone here is managing the same strain in their own way. There is an often mentioned detail in historical discussions. Despite the romantic image of freedom associated with cowboys, the work itself was physically demanding and repetitive, requiring endurance more than bursts of heroism. Sitting here now, feeling the steady ache in your body, that distinction becomes clear. The land continues to change in small ways. Patches of grass give way to drier stretches. The colour shifts subtly, the texture of the ground altering beneath your horse's hooves. You notice these changes more now, perhaps because your body is searching for variation. A breeze moves across the plains, again light but welcome. It cools your face for a moment, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and grass. You turn slightly into it, letting it pass over you before it fades. Your horse flicks its ears, responding to something behind you. You glance back briefly, seeing the rear of the herd stretching out, the riders maintaining their positions in that familiar shifting pattern. Everything continues. There is a thoughtful idea discussed among historians about how much of a cowboy's experience was shaped by solitude even when surrounded by others. The long hours, the repetition, the limited conversation. Sitting here now, riding among the group, yet wrapped in your own steady rhythm of thought, that idea feels close to the truth. You shift again, easing the pressure on your legs, then settle back into a more stable position. Your body adapts, even if it doesn't fully accept the strain. The sun begins to lower slightly, though it is still high enough to cast strong light across the land. Shadows lengthen just a little, offering a hint of what will come later. You take a slow breath, letting it out carefully, feeling the steady rise and fall of your chest. The herd continues forward, unbroken. You continue with it, and as the hours stretch on the rhythm of the ride, shaping your body and your thoughts alike, you begin to understand that this part of the journey is not about overcoming discomfort. It is about carrying it. The afternoon settles into a quieter stretch, not easier, but more familiar, as if your body has begun to accept the pattern, even while it continues to resist it in small, persistent ways. The herd moves forward with that same steady rhythm, and you find yourself paying closer attention to the details that make the work possible. Your horse is no longer just something you ride. It is something you rely on in ways that grow clearer with each passing hour. You notice how it responds before you do. A slight shift in weight when the ground changes, a tightening of muscles when the herd grows uneven, the flick of its ears toward a sound that has not yet reached your full awareness. It is not dramatic, but it is constant. You adjust your hands on the reins, feeling the leather worn smooth in places from repeated use. The connection between your fingers and the bit in your horse's mouth is subtle, almost delicate. Too much pressure and the movement becomes harsh. Too little and the guidance fades. There is a widely accepted understanding in historical studies that a good horse was considered one of the most valuable assets a cowboy could have, often more important than many of the tools they carried. Sitting here now, feeling the steady strength beneath you, that idea feels grounded in reality. You lean slightly to one side, adjusting your position as the terrain shifts again. A patch of uneven ground passes beneath you, your horse navigating it with care, each step measured. At your side, your rope hangs coiled, its weight familiar against your leg. You reach down briefly, adjusting it, feeling the rough texture against your palm. It is not something you have used yet today, but its presence matters. There is a small detail sometimes overlooked in popular portrayals. Much of the skill on a cattle drive came not from dramatic moments of roping or riding, but from quiet, consistent control of small actions. You begin to see that now in the way every movement, no matter how minor, contributes to the larger flow. A calf edges slightly away from the herd, its movement uncertain, drifting toward a patch of grass that lies just beyond the main group. You notice it immediately guiding your horse in a gentle curve to intercept. You do not rush. You do not shout. You simply move into its space, your presence enough to influence its direction. The calf hesitates, then turns back, rejoining the others with a small, almost reluctant step. You return to your position, the moment passing as quietly as it began. A curious note appears in some first-hand accounts. Many cowboys preferred using a simple loop of rope rather than elaborate techniques during everyday work, reserving more complex skills for specific situations. Watching your own small adjustment just now, you understand why simplicity matters here. The sun continues its slow descent, though it still holds enough strength to press warmth into your skin. The light begins to soften slightly, losing some of its earlier sharpness. You feel it in the way shadows stretch just a little longer, the edges less defined. Your horse breathes steadily beneath you, its movement unchanged, though you can sense the effort in it now. The long hours are not just yours, they are shared. You lean forward briefly, running your hand along its neck, again a gesture that feels as much about connection as it does about reassurance. The herd moves on. A rider ahead adjusts his position, guiding a small group of cattle away from a patch of uneven ground. You watch the movement, noting how little effort it takes when done correctly. A slight angle, a gentle pressure, enough to redirect without disrupting. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how much of cowboy skill was learned formally versus developed through observation and repetition. Sitting here now, watching and doing in equal measure, it feels clear that much of it comes from experience rather than instruction. You shift your weight again, easing the pressure on your legs, though the relief remains temporary. The saddle creaks softly beneath you, the sound blending into the larger rhythm of the ride. The land ahead appears unchanged at first glance, but as you look closer you notice subtle variations, a line of slightly taller grass, a patch of ground that dips more than the surrounding area, small details that influence the path without announcing themselves. You follow the lead of the riders ahead, trusting their choices even when you do not fully understand them yet. A breeze moves across the plains once more, carrying with it a faint scent of something distant, perhaps water. Perhaps simply the lingering memory of the earlier rain. You breathe it in, letting it pass through you before it fades. The herd remains steady, their movement almost hypnotic now, the repetition creating a sense of continuity that stretches beyond individual moments. You find yourself settling deeper into that rhythm, your thoughts quieter, your focus more fluid. A lesser-known detail from trail life suggests that many cowboys developed a strong awareness of their surroundings, not through deliberate effort, but through the necessity of constant attention. Over time it became second nature. You begin to feel the edges of that now. Your eyes move without strain, taking in the herd, the land of the riders around you, all without focusing too heavily on any one thing. The work becomes less about individual actions and more about maintaining a balance. The sun lowers further, the light softening more noticeably, now casting a warmer tone across the plains. The long day begins to shift toward its later hours, though there is still time left before rest. You take a slow breath, feeling the steady rise and fall of your chest, the rhythm of your body aligning with the rhythm of the ride. And as you continue forward, your hands steady, your movements more assured than they were before, you begin to understand that skill here is not something you display. It is something you carry quietly in every small decision you make. The light begins to soften in a more noticeable way now, the long stretch of afternoon easing toward evening. The heat loosens its grip slightly, though it does not disappear. It lingers in the ground, rising gently with each step your horse takes, wrapping the air in a quiet warmth that feels less demanding than before. The herd continues forward steady and familiar, and your body moves with it in a way that feels almost automatic now. Not effortless, but practiced. The earlier strain has settled into something you carry without thinking too much about it. You glance toward the riders around you, noticing them more clearly than before. The differences in posture, the way each person holds themselves in the saddle. Some sit upright, their movements controlled and minimal. Others lean slightly, their bodies adjusting more visibly with each step. There is more variety here than you first realized. A commonly recognized aspect of cattle drives is that the men who work them came from a wide range of backgrounds. It was not a single kind of person, not a single story repeated over and over. As you look more closely now, you begin to see that diversity in small ways. A rider ahead speaks briefly to another, his accent different from what you have grown used to hearing. The words are the same, the meaning clear, but the sound carries a different rhythm. To your right, another rider adjusts his hat, the brim shaped slightly differently, worn in a way that suggests long use under a different kind of sun. There is a quiet depth to this group that you are only just beginning to understand. You remember something mentioned in a lesser-known account of trail life. A significant number of cowboys were not white, including black cowboys, many of whom had been freed after the Civil War, as well as Mexican and Tejano riders whose experience with cattle handling often shaped the practices used on these drives. Sitting here now, surrounded by this mix of people, that detail feels less like a footnote and more like a reality. The work itself does not change based on who you are. The herd moves the same, the land demands the same attention, but the stories carried by each rider are different, layered beneath the shared rhythm of the trail. You notice how communication adapts to that. Words are used sparingly, gestures more often. A nod, a shift of the hand, a glance held just long enough to convey meaning. It creates a kind of understanding that does not rely heavily on language. A rider moves closer to you, not abruptly, but with an easy, unhurried motion. He gestures toward a section of the herd where a few animals have begun to drift unevenly. You follow the indication, guiding your horse in that direction, working alongside him without needing further explanation. The movement is smooth, coordinated, even though no plan has been spoken aloud. There is an interesting point sometimes raised in discussions of cowboy culture. The idea of the lone, isolated rider is often emphasized in later storytelling, but in practice, much of the work depended on cooperation and shared awareness. Riding here, now adjusting your position alongside others with minimal communication, that idea feels grounded. The sun lowers further, casting a warmer glow across the plains. The light stretches longer, softening the edges of everything it touches. Shadows extend, blending into one another, creating a more unified landscape. You feel a slight easing in your body as well. Not a full relief, but a shift. The day is beginning to move toward its end, and even if there is still work to be done, there is a quiet awareness of that transition. A curious detail appears in some personal recollections. Riders often develop their own small routines during long drives, habits that help them maintain focus or pass the time. Some adjusted their posture at regular intervals. Others counted steps or movements without fully realizing it. You notice yourself doing something similar, now your attention moving in a quiet pattern. The herd, the ground, the horizon, then back again. The repetition becomes a kind of structure. The breeze returns softer now, carrying the fading warmth of the day. It moves across your face, lifting the edge of your hat slightly, before settling again. Your horse's pace remains steady, though you can feel a subtle fatigue there as well. The long hours are beginning to show, not in dramatic changes, but in small adjustments. A slightly shorter step, a deeper breath. You respond instinctively, easing your guidance, allowing it to maintain a pace that feels sustainable. The herd continues their movement unchanged, their rhythm steady. A thoughtful perspective sometimes discussed by historians is how shared labour in environments like this has created a sense of connection that was not always expressed directly, but felt through action. As you ride here, working alongside others in this quiet, coordinated way, the idea feels present. No one speaks of it. No one needs to. The work itself carries it. The light continues to fade, the sky shifting towards softer tones, the intensity of the day giving way to something more subdued. The horizon takes on a warmer hue, the colours blending gently. You take a slow breath, feeling the air move more easily now, the earlier heat no longer pressing as heavily. The herd begins to show small signs of the day's length as well. Movement remains steady, but there is a slight heaviness to it, a subtle slowing that reflects the accumulated effort. You adjust your position, once more, easing the pressure on your legs, settling into a posture that feels as balanced as possible. And as the day stretches toward its final hours, the work continuing in that same quiet, steady way, you begin to understand that what binds this group together is not just the task, it is the shared experience of carrying it through. The light continues to lower, and with it something in the pace of the day begins to shift. Not a full slowing, Not yet, but a subtle easing that settles into the way both riders and cattle move. The urgency of earlier hours softens, replaced by a steadier, more deliberate rhythm. You feel it in your own body. The strain is still there, the dull weight in your legs, the stiffness in your back, but it no longer demands the same attention. It becomes part of the background, something you carry as naturally as the reins in your hands. The herd stretches forward in a long continuous line, their movements steady, their energy more contained now. Heads dip lower, steps fall into a more consistent pattern. You glance toward the riders around you, again noticing how their posture has changed slightly. Shoulders relax just a fraction, movements become less sharp, more fluid. There is a quiet understanding that the hardest part of the day is passing. A well-known detail from historical records is that cowboys were typically paid modest wages for their work, often around $30 to $40 a month during the late 19th century, depending on experience and the conditions of the drive. Sitting here now, feeling the accumulated effort of the day, that figure takes on a different weight. It is not just money, money. It is time, endurance, repetition. You consider it briefly, then let the thought pass. The work itself does not pause for reflection. A rider ahead shifts his position, guiding a small group of cattle back into line, where the formation has loosened slightly. The movement is smooth, almost effortless, though you know it is anything but. You mirror that attention, scanning your own section of the herd, watching for any sign of imbalance. There is a lesser discussed aspect of trail life that appears in some accounts. Reputation mattered deeply among cowboys, often more than formal titles or pay. A rider known for reliability, for steady work and sound judgment could find more opportunities, more trust. You begin to understand how that reputation is built, not through dramatic moments but through consistency. The sun dips lower still, the light taking on a warmer tone, casting long shadows that stretch across the land. The colours shift gently, the harshness of midday replaced by something softer, more forgiving. Your horse moves with the same steady rhythm, though. You can feel the fatigue in it more clearly now. The long day has left its mark, its breathing is deeper, its steps slightly heavier. You adjust your guidance again, allowing it a bit more ease, trusting the herd's steady movement to carry forward without constant correction. A rider passes you, slowly moving toward a different position, his expression calm, focused. As he goes by, he offers a brief nod, the gesture small but meaningful. There is no need for more. A curious observation appears in some personal writings from the time. Many cowboys measure their success not by how quickly they completed a drive, but by how smoothly it went, how few problems arose, how well the herd was maintained. As you ride here now, watching the steady, uneventful movement of the cattle, that idea feels significant. The absence of trouble is its own achievement. You shift in the saddle again, easing the pressure on your legs, though the relief remains temporary. The saddle creaks softly, the sound blending into the larger rhythm of the ride. The land ahead begins to take on a slightly different shape. Not a dramatic change, but enough to notice. The ground rises gently, then falls again, creating a subtle variation in the path. You follow the lead riders as they adjust the direction, slightly guiding the herd along the easier route. The movement is almost unnoticeable unless you are paying close attention. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how structured these drives truly were, whether they followed strict plans or adapted constantly to conditions. Riding here now, it feels like a balance between the two. There is direction, but there is also flexibility. The breeze returns once more, cooler now, carrying with it the first hints of evening. It brushes against your face, lifting the edge of your hat, offering a brief moment of relief. You breathe it in slowly, letting it settle before it passes. The herd continues forward, their movements steady, their energy more subdued. The long day is beginning to show in them as well, not in any dramatic way, but in small, consistent signs. A slightly slower step, a deeper breath, a quieter presence. You guide your horse alongside them, maintaining your position, your attention steady, your movements controlled. The sky shifts further, the colours deepening, the light softening even more. The horizon glows faintly, the edges of the land blending into getting less defined. You feel a quiet sense of transition, though the work has not yet ended. A thoughtful perspective often raised in historical discussions is how the myth of the cowboy emphasizes independence and freedom, while the reality often involved routine discipline and long hours of structured labor. Sitting here now, moving with the herd, the contrast feels clear. The freedom is there, but it is shaped by the work. The day continues to ease toward its close, the rhythm steady, the movement unbroken. And as you ride on your body, carrying the weight of the hours, your attention still fixed on the herd, you begin to understand that what matters most here is not how the day begins or ends. It is how consistently you move through it. The sun lowers further and the world begins to soften around you in a way that feels almost forgiving after the long stretch of the day. The heat loosens its hold, retreating slowly from your shoulders and back, leaving behind a gentler warmth that settles into the air. The herd responds to this change in its own quiet way. Movement slows just enough to notice, heads dip lower. The steady rhythm remains, but it carries less urgency now, as if both animals and riders are easing toward the end of something that has taken most of the day to unfold. You feel it too. Your body does not suddenly feel better, but the strain seems less sharp, less immediate. The ache in your legs becomes something more distant. Your back settling into a stiffness that no longer demands constant adjustment. You shift in the saddle anyway, out of habit, more than necessity, easing the pressure where you can. The land stretches ahead in long open lines, but now the light changes how you see it. Shadows grow longer, softening the edges of everything they touch, colours deepen, blending into one another. It feels quieter even though the sounds remain the same. There is a well-documented reality of cattle drives that becomes more apparent at this stage of the day. The evening hours were often used to find a suitable place to rest the herd, somewhere with enough grass and relative safety. As you look ahead now, you begin to understand how important that decision will be. The riders begin to adjust their positions again, though more gradually than before. The formation loosens slightly, allowing the herd to spread just enough to graze as they move. You guide your horse alongside them, your attention still steady, though. Your thoughts drift a little more easily now. The flies begin to gather. At first, it is only a few circling lazily in the warm air. Then more join, drawn by the presence of the cattle, the moisture, the scent of everything that has built up over the day. They settle on your horse, on the cattle, even on you. You brush them away instinctively, your hand moving without thought, though. You know it will not keep them away for long. There is a small but telling detail noted in some historical accounts. Flies and insects were a constant irritation on the trail, especially in warmer months, affecting both cattle and riders in ways that added to the overall strain of the journey. You see that clearly now. The cattle flick their tails more frequently, shifting their heads, trying to escape the persistent presence. Your horse does the same, its ears twitching, its skin rippling slightly as it reacts. The rhythm continues, but it carries a new layer of discomfort. You adjust your position again, lifting one leg slightly, then the other, trying to ease the pressure that has built up over hours of. The relief is brief, but it is enough. The breeze returns softer now, carrying with it the faint scent of grass and something cooler that hints at the coming night. It moves through the herd, lifting the dust slightly, though not enough to obscure your view. A rider ahead solos, raising a hand in a small signal. The movement passes quietly through the group and the pace of the herd eases further. You follow the change, guiding your horse to match the slower rhythm. There is an interesting observation found in some trail diaries. The middle stretch of a cattle drive, often marked by long, uneventful days, was considered by some to be the most mentally challenging. Not because of danger, but because of the repetition. You feel that now. The work continues, but without the sharp moments that demand full attention. Your mind drifts, then returns, then drifts again. You think about the morning, the dust, the storm, the river. Each part of the day feels distinct yet connected by the steady thread of movement. The herd begins to spread slightly more as the riders allow them to graze more freely. Heads lower to the ground, pulling at grass in slow, deliberate motions. The pace slows further, though it does not stop completely. This is a transition, not quite rest, not quite movement. A point often raised in historical discussions is that maintaining the condition of the cattle was essential, as their value depended on their health upon arrival. Allowing them to graze even briefly was part of that balance. You watch them now, noticing how their behaviour shifts when given that space. The tension eases. The the movement becomes more relaxed. You guide your horse along the edge of the herd, maintaining your position, ensuring that the spread does not become too wide. The flies continue to circle persistent, though the breeze helps keep them in motion rather than settling too heavily. Your horse lowers its head briefly, then lifts it again, maintaining its pace. The sky shifts further, the colours deepening into softer tones, the light stretching across the land in long, gentle lines. You take a slow breath, feeling the air move more easily now, the earlier heat replaced by something more comfortable. The herd continues to move, though more slowly, their energy fading into something quieter. You feel the same. The long day has settled into you, not as a burden, but as a presence that shapes how you move, how you think. A thoughtful idea appears in some historical reflections. The endurance required on the trail was not just physical, but mental, shaped by the ability to remain steady through long stretches of repetition. You begin to understand that more clearly now. The work is not about constant action. It is about consistency. The light continues to fade the horizon, softening further, the edges of the land blending into the coming evening. And as you ride on the herd, moving in that quieter, slower rhythm, you begin to sense that the day is nearing its close. Not with a sudden stop, but with a gradual easing into something calmer. The evening settles gently over the plains, and for the first time since before sunrise, the light no longer feels like something you must endure. It softens, spreading across the land in long warm tones that blur the edges of distance and make everything appear slightly calmer than it truly is. The herd slows further their movement, easing into a near drift as they graze more freely. Heads remain low, pulling at grass in steady, unhurried motions. The urgency of the day has almost completely faded, replaced by something quieter. You guide your horse along the outer edge, maintaining a loose boundary, not forcing the cattle into a tight formation, but not allowing them to wander too far either. Their balance is delicate, though it feels easier now than it did earlier. Your body settles into the saddle with a deeper heaviness, the long hours finally catching up in a way that is difficult to ignore. Your legs feel less responsive. Your back holds a steady stiffness that no longer shifts easily with small adjustments. You accept it. There is little else to do. A rider nearby hums softly, almost absent-mindedly, the sound blending into the low murmur of the herd. It is not meant to be heard clearly, not meant to draw attention. Just a quiet thread of sound that moves alongside everything else. There is a lesser-known cultural detail from the trail that many cowboys used music or simple humming during long rides, not as performance, but as a way to pass time and maintain a sense of calm for both themselves and the cattle. You find yourself listening to it more than you expected. It does not break the sound. It becomes part of it. The sky deepens in colour, shifting from warm gold into softer shades that hint at the coming night. The horizon glows faintly, the land beneath it darkening in gradual layers. You take a slow breath, the air cooler, now carrying the faint scent of grass and earth that has settled after the heat of the day. The flies begin to thin as well, their presence less constant, their movement slower in the cooling air. Your horse flicks its ears less frequent, its body easing slightly as the irritation fades. The herd remains steady, their movement now more about grazing than travelling. Each step is smaller, more deliberate, the line of cattle less stretched than before. You adjust your position again though. The movement feels heavier now, your body less willing to shift. The saddle creaks softly beneath you, the sound familiar, almost comforting. There is a thoughtful perspective sometimes mentioned in it in historical reflections on trail life. The evenings were often the most reflective time of day when the work eased enough for thoughts to surface more clearly. You feel that now. Your mind drifts more freely, moving between the immediate work and quieter reflections. The rhythm of the herd no longer demands constant attention, allowing space for something else. A rider moves closer, his pace unhurried, his posture relaxed in a way that reflects the changing tone of the day. He does not speak, but his presence is steady, aligned with yours for a few moments before drifting away again. It feels natural. The work does not require words here. The land stretches out around you darker now, the details softening as the light fades. What was once clear and sharp becomes more blended, more unified. You notice how your senses shift in response. Your eyes adjust to the lower light, focusing more on movement than detail. Your ears pick up the sounds of the herd more clearly, the subtle shifts in rhythm that signal changes. There is a small but interesting note found in some accounts. As evening approached, riders often became more attentive to sound as visibility decreased and the risk of unseen disturbances increased. You begin to understand that instinctively. The herd continues to graze, their movements slow, their presence steady. The earlier tension, the storm, the crossing all feel distant now, absorbed into the long stretch of the day. You guide your horse in a gentle arc, maintaining your position, your movement smooth despite the fatigue. The sky deepens further, the first hints of twilight settling in. The colours soften into something cooler, the warmth of the day fading into a quieter tone. You feel a subtle shift in yourself as well. The need for constant action diminishes. The awareness remains. A rider's voice carries softly across the distance, not a command, but a simple call, checking positions, maintaining connection as the light continues to fade. You respond with a small gesture, a lift of your hand, enough to signal that all is steady. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how much of the cowboy experience was shaped by solitude versus shared presence. Even within a group, the long hours and open space created moments of quiet isolation. Riding here now, surrounded by others, yet held within your own steady rhythm, that idea feels true. You are part of the group, but you are also alone in your own thoughts. The herd shifts slightly, a few animals moving closer together as the light fades further. You adjust your position, easing the pressure, maintaining that careful balance. The breeze returns once more, cooler now, carrying with it the first real sense of night. It moves across your face, lifting the edge of your hat, settling into the fabric of your clothes. You breathe it in, slowly letting it settle. The day is not fully ended, but it is close. And as you continue to ride the herd, moving in that slow, quiet rhythm, the light fading around you, you begin to understand that this part of the journey is not about movement or effort. It is about holding steady as everything begins to slow. The last light slips lower, and the land begins to lose its sharpness. Edges soften, colours blend, and distance becomes harder to judge. What felt wide and open during the day now feels deeper, quieter, almost enclosed by the growing dark. The herd responds in small, steady ways. Their movement slows further, settling into a loose cluster as grazing gives way to rest. Some remain standing, heads low. Others shift their weight, adjusting their footing on the cooling ground. You guide your horse along the outer edge, maintaining a gentle boundary, not forcing the cattle into a tight space, but keeping them from drifting too far into the open night. Your body feels heavier now, not just tired, but settled into the kind of fatigue that does not ask for relief anymore. It simply exists. Your legs hold their position with less flexibility. Your back remains stiff, no longer adjusting easily. You shift slightly in the saddle, though the movement feels slower, more deliberate. The sky deepens into a darker shade, remaining light thinning until it barely holds the horizon in view. Above, the first stars begin to appear faint at first, then more clearly as the last traces of daylight fade. A rider's voice carries softly across the space, marking the transition without announcing it outright. The night watch is beginning. A broadly accepted practice on cattle drives was to divide the night into shifts, with riders taking turns circling the herd to keep it calm and contained. As you hear the quiet coordination around you, you begin to understand how this system takes shape without formal instruction. You remain mounted, guiding your horse into a slow, steady path around the herd. The movement is circular now, not forward. The rhythm changes completely. Step by step, turn by turn. The sounds shift as well. The steady forward motion of the day is replaced by quieter, more contained noises. The soft rustle of cattle shifting in place. The occasional low call, the steady, measured steps of your horse. It feels different, more focused, more contained. A rider nearby begins to hum again, the same low, steady sound you noticed earlier, though now it carries further in the stillness. It blends with the night in a way that feels almost natural. There is a small detail noted in several first-hand accounts. Cowboys often use sound, whether humming, singing, or speaking softly, to create a sense of continuity for the herd during the night, reducing the likelihood of sudden disturbances. You find yourself listening to it again, the rhythm steady, almost hypnotic. The stars grow brighter overhead, filling the sky in a way that feels expansive even as the land around you fades into shadow. Without the sun, the sense of distance changes. What was once clearly defined becomes more uncertain. Your eyes adjust slowly, relying more on movement than detail. The outline of the herd remains visible, a darker shape against the slightly lighter ground. Your ears become more important. You listen to the rhythm of breathing, the shifting of hooves, the subtle changes that signal movement within the group. There is a thoughtful perspective discussed in some historical reflections. Night riding required a different kind of awareness, one less reliant on sight and more attuned to sound and instinct. You feel that shift now. Your horse moves carefully beneath you, its steps quieter, more deliberate. It senses the change as well, adjusting without needing guidance. You follow its lead, allowing your movements to become softer, less direct. The air cools further, settling against your skin, easing the heat that had built up over the day. It carries a faint scent of grass and earth, deeper now, less touched by the sun. You take a slow breath, letting it out gently, the rhythm of your breathing aligning with the slow pace of the ride. The herd remains steady. No sudden movements, no sharp disruptions, just the quiet presence of many animals resting together. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how often night watches were truly calm versus punctuated by sudden events. While stories often highlight the dramatic moments, many accounts suggest that long stretches passed without incident. Sitting here now, moving slowly around the herd, you begin to understand that calm. It is not empty. It's full of small, steady awareness. A steer shifts slightly within the group, its movement more noticeable in the quiet. You adjust your position, guiding your horse just enough to maintain the balance, then settle back into your path. The circle continues, turn by turn. The stars overhead grow clearer, the sky deepening into a darker, richer tone. The land beneath you fades further, leaving only the immediate space around you, fully present. You feel your thoughts slowing as well. The repetition, the quiet, the steady motion all combine into something that feels almost meditative. A rider passes you, slowly moving in the opposite direction along the edge of the herd. He nods briefly, the gesture small but meaningful, then continues on. The shared work continues without interruption. There is a subtle comfort in that. You are not alone, even in the quiet. The herd shifts again, a small ripple of movement passing through, then settling. You remain steady, your presence part of the larger balance that holds everything together. And as the night deepens, the world narrowing to the circle of movement, you maintain the soft sounds of the herd and the steady rhythm of your horse. You begin to understand that this part of the journey is not about progress. It is about holding stillness. The night stretches on, not in a straight line, but in slow repeating cycles that feel both endless and contained. You continue your path around the herd, your horse moving in that steady, careful rhythm, each step placed with quiet intention. The circle becomes your world now. Turn by turn, the stars above seem brighter than before, filling the sky with a depth that feels almost impossible to measure. Without the distraction of daylight, you notice them more clearly, their presence steady, unchanged by anything happening below. The herd remains mostly calm. Mostly. A few cattle shift now and then, their movement creating small ripples that pass through the group before settling again. You watch for those changes, your attention focused not on any one animal but on the pattern as a whole. This is how you read the herd now. Not in peace, but in motion. A well-established detail from historical accounts is that night guards were often assigned in shifts of a few hours, allowing riders to rest in rotation, while ensuring the herd remained under constant watch. As you ride now, you begin to feel the weight of that system. Time moves differently here. Minutes stretch, moments repeat. Your body feels the fatigue more deeply now, not sharp but heavy. Your legs hold their position with effort. Your back remains stiff, your shoulders slightly rounded from the long hours. You shift in the saddle again, easing the pressure where you can, though the relief is brief. Your horse continues forward, its breathing steady, its movement unchanged, though you can feel the tiredness there as well. The long day has settled into both of you. A soft sound reaches you from across the herd. A voice, low, steady. Not a call, not a command, just a quiet thread of sound. Another rider continuing that practice of humming or speaking softly, maintaining a sense of continuity through the night. It blends with the rhythm of hooves and breath, becoming part of the atmosphere rather than standing apart from it. There is a lesser-known observation found in some trail journals. Cattle were often more responsive to consistent, gentle sound than to sudden silence, which could sometimes make them uneasy. As you listen now, the idea feels reasonable. The night air grows cooler, settling more firmly against your skin. The earlier warmth has faded, replaced by a softness that feels almost comforting after the heat of the day. You take a slow breath, the air moving easily, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth. The circle continues. Turn by turn, your awareness shifts again, relying more on instinct now than deliberate observation. Your eyes adjust to the darkness, your ears picking up subtle changes in sound. A steer shifts more abruptly than the others, its movement sharper, breaking the quiet pattern. You respond immediately, guiding your horse closer, not rushing, just enough to re-establish the balance. The steer settles. The pattern holds. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how often night disturbances led to full stampedes and whether the risks were as constant as some accounts suggest. Sitting here now, moving through this quiet, steady rhythm, it feels like both things are true. The calm is real, but so is the possibility beneath it. You remain aware of that even as the hours stretch on. A rider approaches slowly, his shift nearing its end. He speaks quietly as he draws alongside you, his voice low enough not to carry far. "Your turn soon," he says. You nod, the meaning clear. Relief, subtle but present, moves through you. The idea of rest, even brief, carries a weight that feels significant now. But the work is not finished yet. You continue your path, maintaining the circle, your movement steady, your attention still fixed on the herd. The stars shift slightly overhead, their positions changing in a way that marks the passing of time, even if you are not consciously tracking it. Your body feels heavier still, your movement slower, though you maintain control. A small detail noted in some historical reflections is that experienced riders learned to conserve energy during night watches, minimizing unnecessary movement, allowing the rhythm of the horse to carry them. You begin to do the same. Less adjustment, less tension, more reliance on the steady motion beneath you. The herd remains calm, their presence a quiet mass in the darkness, their breathing steady, their movement minimal. The circle continues, turn by turn. Eventually the rider returns, signaling the end of your watch. The transition is quiet, almost seamless. You slow your horse, guiding it out of the circle, passing the responsibility without ceremony. You dismount carefully, your legs absorbing the ground with a stiffness that feels deeper than before. For a moment you stand still, letting your body adjust to the change. The ground feels solid, unmoving. You lead your horse a short distance away, tying it with practiced motion, your hands moving more from habit than conscious thought. The camp is quiet, most of the others already resting, their forms barely visible in the low light. You move toward your bedroll, each step slow, deliberate, your body heavy with the weight of the day. There is a thoughtful idea often mentioned in historical discussions. Rest on the trail was not about comfort, but about recovery, about taking what little time was available to prepare for what came next. You lower yourself onto the ground, the blanket rough beneath you, the earth still, holding a faint warmth from the day. You lie back, look up at the sky for a moment. The stars, the quiet, the steady presence of the herd nearby. And as your eyes begin to close, your body settling into the stillness after so many hours of movement, you understand that even here in this brief pause, the journey continues, just more quietly. Sleep does not arrive all at once. You lie there on the ground, your body heavy, your muscles finally allowed to release the tension they have carried all day. And yet your mind lingers for a while, held somewhere between wakefulness and rest. The sounds of the herd drift in and out, soft and steady, a low presence that feels both distant and close at the same time. You are aware of the ground beneath you, firm, uneven, warmer than the air for a short while, holding on to the last of the day's heat before it slowly fades into the cool of the night. Your blanket is thin, Your pillow little more than a rolled piece of cloth, and still it feels like enough. Not comfortable in the way you might be used to, but sufficient. Your eyes close, time passes. When you wake again, it is not sudden. It is gradual, your awareness returning in pieces. The sky above has shifted, the stars no longer in the same position. The air feels cooler now, settling more deeply against your skin. For a moment you remain still, not yet ready to move, letting your body adjust to the idea of waking. Then the stiffness returns. Your back tightens first, followed by your legs, a slow reminder of everything you carried the day before. You shift slightly, testing the movement, feeling the resistance, before it eases just enough to allow you to sit up. Around you, the camp is beginning to stir, not with noise, with motion. A figure rises nearby, moving quietly, careful not to disturb those still resting. Another follows, stretching slowly, arms reaching upward before settling again. Or the herd remains in place, their forms barely visible in the dim light before dawn. Some stand, some lie down. Their presence is quieter now, more contained. A commonly accepted detail from historical records is that cattle drives followed a daily rhythm that began early, often before sunrise, repeating the same cycle day after day. As you sit there now, feeling the beginning of that cycle again, it becomes clear how structured this life truly is. You push yourself to your feet, your movements slow at first, your body adjusting step by step. The ground feels cool beneath you now. The warmth of the previous evening completely gone. You walk toward your horse, which lifts its head as you approach its presence, steady, unchanged. You run a hand along its neck, feeling the familiar warmth, the quiet connection that has carried you through the previous day. There is a small but interesting detail mentioned in some personal accounts. Many riders formed strong bonds with their horses over the course of long drives, not through dramatic moments, but through the consistency of shared effort. You begin to understand that now. You prepare your saddle with practice motions, your hands moving more confidently than they did before. Each adjustment feels more familiar, less uncertain. Nearby, the cook has already begun preparing the morning's meal, the faint scent of coffee drifting through the air once more. It is a signal as much as it is a comfort. The day is starting again. You take a tin cup as it is handed to you, the warmth seeping into your fingers. The taste is the same as before, strong, slightly bitter, but welcome. You eat in that same quiet way the group gathered, loosely, conversation minimal. The focus on what comes next, rather than what has already passed. A perspective often discussed in historical reflections is how repetition shaped the experience of the trail, each day blending into the next, creating a rhythm that was both predictable and demanding. You feel that now. The previous day already feels distant. Not because it was insignificant, but because it is part of a pattern that continues without pause. You finish your meal, setting the cup aside, wiping your hands against your trousers, the dust returning as if it had never left. The sky begins to lighten, the first hints of dawn appearing along the horizon, soft and gradual. The herd stirs. Movement hand returns. Not sudden, not urgent. Just the quiet beginning of another cycle. A rider nearby adjusts his hat, glancing toward the horizon, then toward the herd, his expression calm, focused. No words are needed. The work is understood. There is an ongoing discussion among historians about how much of the cowboy experience was defined by monotony versus moments of intensity. Sitting here now at the start of another day that will likely follow the same pattern, it feels like both are inseparable. The repetition gives meaning to the moments that break it. You move toward your position, mounting your horse with a motion that feels more natural. Now your body remembering even as it resists. The saddle creaks softly beneath you. The herd begins to shift forward with the first steps of the day echoing the first steps of the one before. Dust rises again. The rhythm returns. And as you settle into it once more, the cycle continuing without pause, you begin to understand that this work is not defined by any single day. It is defined by all of them together. Morning returns in a way that feels both familiar and distant at the same time. The light spreads slowly across the plains, touching the herd, the riders, the ground beneath you, as if nothing from the previous day has changed, and yet everything has settled a little deeper into place. You move with that same quiet routine, saddle adjusted, reins gathered, a brief touch along your horse's neck. The herd begins to move again, their steps steady, their rhythm unchanged. Dust rises once more, though it feels softer in this early light, less harsh, almost muted by the calm of the morning. You fall into position without thinking about it too much. Your body remembers, even if it still aches. The work continues. The land stretches ahead in that same endless way, the horizon always present, always just out of reach. There is no clear marker that tells you how far you have come or how far remains. Only movement. Only the steady passage of time carried in each step. There is a widely recognized historical reality that cattle drives could last for months, covering hundreds of miles from Texas to railheads in Kansas and beyond. Sitting here now, feeling the repetition of another morning, that scale becomes something you can begin to understand, not as a number, but as a lived experience. You guide your horse alongside the herd, your movements steady, your attention quiet but present. The skills you struggled with at the beginning now feel more natural, less forced. You notice things without effort, a slight shift in the herd, a change in the ground, the way the wind moves across the grass. It all becomes part of a larger awareness. A curious detail from some lesser-known accounts suggests that many cowboys measured time less by days and more by landmarks, rivers, crossed towns, past stretches of land remembered. You think about that as you ride, how the days blur together, how the journey becomes something continuous rather than divided. The herd moves on their rhythm, unchanged, their presence steady. The riders maintain their positions, adjusting subtly, communicating without words, the group functioning as a single shifting structure. There is a thoughtful debate among historians about how much of the cowboy legend was shaped after the fact, how stories transformed routine labor into something more dramatic. As you sit here now, moving through this quiet, repetitive work, it feels clear that the reality holds its own kind of depth, not in spectacle, but in persistence. The sun rises higher, the light strengthening the warmth, returning gradually. The cool edge of morning fades, replaced by the familiar presence of heat. You adjust your hat again, the motion automatic now. Your horse continues beneath you, steady, reliable, its movements as much a part of the rhythm as your own. You run your hand along its neck once more, the gesture brief but meaningful. The herd stretches forward, the land unfolds, the day continues, and yet something feels different, not in the work, but in how you carry it. The uncertainty that marked the beginning has softened. The movements that once required thought now happen without it. The rhythm that once felt foreign now feels familiar. You are still tired, still aware of every ache. But there is a steadiness beneath it, a quiet understanding. There is an often overlooked idea in historical reflections on trail life, that over time the work shapes not just the body, but the way a person experiences the world. The pace, the attention, the sense of time. You begin to feel that now. The herd slows slightly as the riders prepare for another day's pattern, another stretch of movement that will mirror the one before. There is no final moment. No clear ending, just continuation. The cycle repeats, and as you ride on, the sound of hooves blending into the steady rhythm that has carried you this far, the open land stretching endlessly ahead, you begin to sense something quieter beneath it all. Not exhaustion, not relief, but acceptance. You are part of this now. The movement, the rhythm, the long unbroken line of days that define what it is to live this way. The light softens again as time passes, the edges of the day beginning to blur into something calmer, something more distant. Your breathing slows, your grip on the reins loosens slightly, the herd moves on, and you move with it. The sounds around you grow softer in your awareness, the steady rhythm becoming almost like a lull, something that carries you rather than something you must actively follow. The land fades slightly at the edges, the horizon softens. The sky stretches above, wide and quiet, and as everything settles into that gentle, unbroken motion, you allow yourself to drift with it, your thoughts slowing, your body easing into the rhythm that no longer feels demanding. Just present, just steady, just enough. Now the pace softens even more. The movement becomes quieter. You are no longer focusing on each step, each adjustment, each small correction. Instead, you feel the whole of it, the herd, the horse, the land all moving together in a calm, continuous flow. The air feels cooler again, or perhaps you simply notice it differently now. It brushes against your skin, and gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of grass and distance. You breathe in slowly, and out. The rhythm continues, but it no longer asks anything of you. Your body rests within it. Your thoughts settling, the earlier weight of the day fading into something softer, something less defined. The sounds grow quieter. The world narrows, not in a way that feels closed, but in a way that feels calm, safe. The steady movement of your horse beneath you becomes almost like a lull, a gentle sway that carries you forward without effort. The herd remains, but their presence softens, their shapes blending into the landscape, their sounds becoming part of the quiet. The sky stretches above, wide and still. The horizon fades, and you remain here within this slow, steady rhythm, where nothing needs to change, where nothing needs to be done. Just rest, just breathe, just drift. Sweet dream. Something